Hello, and welcome to round two of the WIXOSS October Ceremony 2022. Round one kind of ended roughly. I felt like I was in control most of the game, and then the wheels kind of fell off at the end, unfortunately. So, hoping to right the ship here. I'm up against Mono White, so already, Mono White I would say is certainly more popular than Angels. I think right now, at least, it's safe to say that it's stronger, I think, than Angels. But again, it's going to be the theme, I think, of this ceremony. Is there's a lot of wildcard decks. I believe in the 7 rounds, I believe I had 2 actual teams, and then the other 5 were all dream teams, which is great because it's more of a lot of deck diversity, really interesting matchups. I mean, in previous ceremonies, there was one I had 5 card jockeys in one day before. 5 of the 7 matches were all card jockey. I think that was when I was playing Wolf. Especially early on too, there were so many no limits. There wasn't a whole lot of diversity, but in this one, it was like no 2 matches were the same. So it was really cool to see a lot of people really brought all kinds of fun decks. Gives me hope for the future. I alluded to this in previous that I'm in the process of building a Cosmos deck, and I don't think it's ready yet. It's missing some important pieces, like quite literally a piece. It would be really nice to have. Some of them you can use some of the other pieces like Silent Assassin or anything, but just the Cosmos colors in general are a lot harder to make it fit. It really lacks that kind of big, flashy piece where you can do all kinds of crazy damages and type effects. So I'm hopeful once Welcome Back Diva comes out to put the red piece that comes in there into that and have a moderately to somewhat successful Cosmos build. But again, we're not there yet. Um, so early game, relatively straightforward. Not a whole lot has happened. He did play a Zhao, but I vanished it with an Enervating Melody. I Amethystaled, and then the Life Burst was a Haniel, so he was able to fill that lane, even despite the Baphomet. So he was able to save and enter that way. And then he flipped into a Life Burst. I couldn't see who that was, that returned the Baphomet to my hand. So opened up a lane through that as well. So his Signy, I believe they are plus 5k on my turn. So I don't think that 5k is relevant at the moment. Again, those lanes are open, so it doesn't really matter. The Angel level 1 will return the other Signy, the Amethystal, to my hand. So this is kind of what white does, right? It does a lot of bouncing effects, which is kind of like an enter denial. It's not really a hand denial tool because, again, I can just replay those cards next turn, but it does restrict my enter. You'll see I have 0 enter right now, which at this point in the game, considering my board is completely empty, is relatively uncommon for where we're at. So he's got his 2 8Ks, and he's got a Zhao Yun, another one as well. I've got 3 open lanes. Flip into a Baphomet. Flip into, that is Diabride, so I will be able to vanish the up to Signy. So I do get some protection out of that. And unlike the previous game, I actually have Servants in this game. So they are in the deck, as you can see, which is good for me. That it's, again, usually I try with this deck in particular, if I don't have one in my opener, I try to dig for one with X Echo. That's one of the reasons why I like to run it. So the combination of Echo and, again, with Machina, the ability to pull a level 1 back. You discard a level 1 red to Echo to draw 3, and then you just pull that level 1 right back with Machina, in addition to clearing a lane. So I don't know, what did I do to Zhao? Did I vanish it again with the spell? Oh no, it was the Life Burst. Duh. It was the Diabride Life Burst. So yeah, we Machina Wing Slash, bring back a Baphomet. There's already a Baphomet in my hand, but having a bunch of them is not a bad idea, just because there's so much recursion. You do want to turn on Death Deck if you can, try to get the modes, the best. If you can get the full 20 in your discard pile before you use it, obviously you get the biggest value out of it. The downside is if the game does go long, you actually do need to be worried about decking yourself out, which thankfully I did not refresh myself all tournament, which is really good. There's definitely one game where it was like a real issue. Um, there's a game, I don't remember if there's a couple of games I was not able to record for various reasons. One of them was against the Tamago Center. I don't know if I recorded that one or not, but that one I was in real danger of milling out of that game, but I was able to kind of work my way around it. So Amethystal, we do the whole draw and discard. Baphomet does get in. The lane is he bounced with Exia. He bounced the other one. So now we Deus attack, which he does not have a guard, which is good for me. So I'm feeling pretty good. I believe, have a servant still in my hand. I'm at 5 cloth, but he does have lion, so I know that to watch out for disrespect, obviously, because that card is, especially against aggro decks, I mean, that's kind of a blowout card. But this deck is pretty efficient at opening up lanes that it's kind of always a threat that I have on board. So he is looking at what to fill the lanes with. I'm not super familiar with the mono white build in general, so I don't know what the thought process is here. I don't think he has a lot of like actual active removal that comes. I know he has a few bounce effects, but he goes into Haniel, so he pulls a Lynx off the top, which again the Cosmos player in me is pretty familiar with that card. So he pays for, I can't remember the name of that card, but he exceeds. It's, you look at top 5, you put one into your hand. If you pay the exceed cost, which you did, you get 2 of them instead. Miracle Draw, I believe is what it's called. So I imagine he's probably digging for a servant at this point, because again, his lanes are filled. I mean, that's kind of something you do, right? If you don't have them, you kind of got to find them. So I'm at 2 open lanes. Again, only 2 enter, which is kind of the strength of white, is keeping your enter low. But he does attack into my Signy to vanish it, which was a little surprising. Flips into Sabnok, which I am trying to figure out. Who to vanish at this point. I'm getting some clarification. His Signy that's on the right it gets plus 2,000 for each white Elrig on the field. So it's actually 14,000 level 2, which is like crazy to think about. That you can have just a vanilla 14k level 2, no big deal. So I vanished the center one. I do have another servant to guard. So I do need to be worried about White Heaven, because I know that opens a couple lanes. But I still have 3 cloth. I still have both of my level 2 assists. I've got Siren at 1 open lane. I have all the capacity to open up, multiples again with either the Deus effects. I still have not used Death Deck, so that can open up a lane. I also, which I believe we will see in a moment, if I remember right. It's usually about this time where I trigger a victory. I'm asking about the clarification for why that thing is still so big. And again, it's just because all of his Elrigs are white. So it's just always a 14k, which is like so good. Again, a level 2. So yeah, there's trigger victory. So he does go into a Lynx, but again, I have no Signy on the field for him to bounce, so it does not matter. Not that it really would have mattered anyway, because it's still on my main phase. I could have just replayed them. So now we fill the lanes. I activate Dark Energy's Enter ability to vanish the Haniel, which when it does that, it enter charges 1, so it's basically, totally free, I suppose, at that point, which is really nice. Dark Energy in this deck in particular is so good, because all of Deus' stuff is specifically subtracting power, and Dark Energy just feasts off of that. So I play an Exizax, I play a Steampunk, again, just fill the lanes, put pressure on. I opt to not go for vanishing his 14k, partially just because I was like, okay, he's probably going to disrespect here. He has a bunch of cards, he has a bunch of enter. I don't want to invest a lot of resources into vanishing that Signy, only to have it stopped, the attack stopped anyway. Like, if he's going to disrespect, he's going to stop everything. Like, he basically has, I guess the short version is he's going to have to disrespect anyway. So I don't need to put the added pressure to try to vanish the 14k to bait out the disrespect. Like the amount of resources I would waste is probably greater than the amount that he would waste, because again, he has so much enter, he has a bunch of cards in hand. I only have 3 enter. I don't have a whole lot of cards in hand, and I still have both of my assists that I can grow into as well. So it just felt unnecessary to put the added pressure to open up the third lane, because it probably would have required a soul plus something else. I suppose I could have done it with 2 souls, like on 2 different, because you can only have 1 soul per Signy. So I could have done it that way. We realize at this point, which I realized as I'm watching this back, my limit was not enough to have the steampunk on the field. So basically what we do is I swap out the steampunk for a servant that's in my hand. Because, again, sort of contrary to the previous game, I had so many servants that I actually still had one in my hand. Like, there's one that's on the field, and there's still that one that's in my hand, compared to the last game where I didn't find it until I didn't need it. So, again, but luck of the draw, sometimes that just happens. So, and thankfully he was nice enough to, because that would have changed the math as well. You know, obviously he wouldn't have necessarily disrespected, I think, if the lane had been left open. So for the sake of having things, because it's not like I used anything on the steampunk. That's another thing I could have done too, is I could have moved the soul, activated the steampunk, vanished it anyway. At the end of the day, especially given the fact that my limit couldn't support it, it would have made things so much more complex that I'm kind of glad I didn't go for it. But additionally, you'll see here, he's got Exia, he's got Arcwin, and he's got the 14k level 2. So he is like all shields up at this point. And again, thankfully, I still have the enter, and I still have both of the assists I need for this. So the fact that I didn't invest all that enter, because he just... he bounced all that stuff, I believe, to my hand. I wasn't seeing where I was going. So we go into Machina Smash to vanish the Exia, which you got to do that on their turn, because if the Exia stays on your turn, that's just a wasted lane. So that's something I really needed to do. And even though it is a 14k, the fact that it's level 2, it still plays into X, that I can still vanish it. Because you pay X based on the level of the Signy. The X crossfade, or whatever that's called, it doesn't care what the size is, it cares what the level is. I know it's level 2, so I pay 2 enter. So I have exactly the amount of enter I need to open the 2 lanes, to take the 2 less damage. I'm not in any lethal, threat range right now. Basically what I'm doing, because he also used Akinos once per game. So what I'm actually doing, even though it wasn't the end of the world if I took all that damage, what I'm actually doing is, because as soon as my turn starts, all of his Signy gain shadow for everything, so I could not get past them. And I don't believe I have a Kentucky in my hand to get Assassin to get through. So what I basically ended up doing is opening the lanes, partially to save the damage, but primarily just because I knew I would not be able to open them on my turn. And then at this point, I mean, Arcwin's got Shadow, so I don't need the Dark Energy or the Steampunk abilities at this point. Basically, you just fill up the lanes, hope you don't hit a Life Burst, hope he doesn't have a guard. He goes into Xenocluster to draw a card. Steampunk attacks. No Life Burst, I believe, on that one. And yeah, that was a Zhao. And Dark Energy goes in for the win. So that one went a little bit more in my favor. Having the servants helped. The assists really helped too. I mean, just the timing of it. The fact that I was able to clear those lanes before the shadow really mattered was very helpful. But that was one, I mean, I used every single piece of enter that I had left. It's the kind of thing that if he survived that turn, which there's definitely a possibility in a world where that happens, where he survives that turn, and then on his next turn he White Heavens and opens a bunch of lanes and then kind of swings in for lethal that way. So it went pretty well, but the game was a lot closer than I think the end made it. It seemed like I was in control, but it certainly could have swung the other way pretty quickly and pretty easily. So as always, thank you for watching, and we'll see you in round 3.